Kia ora. Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 83, The Phenomenon Encore. For those of you who are new listeners, the reason I'm playing encores at the moment is because I had an accident about a month ago and I broke my arm in two places. So I've not been able to do much work on our new season 7 of the podcast. I am slowly chipping away and I've almost got the first episode done, but it's a bit of a mission for me to do much at the moment. So I've been playing for the past 2 weeks, and this is the third week. I've been playing my favourite episodes out of all my 6 seasons. I'm playing the 4 favourite episodes. So this week is the third week. Next week is the final week of the encores, and then I'll go to my regular scheduled podcasting program. But it's so hard to choose just 4 programs that were my favourites. Look, I have to say, every program that I'm working on at that point in time is my favourite program. I just love what I do with a passion, and I have had some amazing guests, and simply because they didn't make it to my number 4 programs that I'm playing is not because I didn't find them of value or I didn't love them or I didn't find them interesting. I simply chose programs that stretched me, tested me, made me think in some way, and that's the reason why I chose these as my favourites. But honestly, I can't really say that there's any episode that I've done that I really haven't enjoyed. So with that being said, this is the third of the 4 programs that are encores, and I really enjoyed my conversation with director James Fox about his work that he put into creating his documentary, The Phenomenon. So for your listening pleasure, I present to you now The Phenomenon Encore. Enjoy. Tēnā koutou, nau mai, haere mai. Hello everyone, welcome to the Walking the Shadowlands podcast. Let me be your guide as we take a walk into the realms of the unexplained, of the paranormal, of things that go bump in the night and haunt your dreams.
Your hosts?
I'm Marianne. Thanks so much for joining me today, tonight, whatever time it is, wherever you're living in this beautiful world of ours. Sit back, relax, let me be your guide as we walk into the Shadowlands together and see what awaits us there. Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm so very excited to share this particular episode with you in my podcast and in my Facebook group. I have never made any secret of the fact that I have had ET or star people encounters my entire life. I've shared in this podcast and in others where I've been interviewed snippets of my experiences here and there. I've never been shy about talking about what I've been a part of, along with countless others throughout the world. So UFOs, encounters and abductions have always been a passion of mine. It's been a part of my knowing since I was a child, and part of the reason that I started this podcast to begin with, to help share information and knowledge about life that exists outside of this reality that we are all currently aware of and knowing about. So I do keep an eye out on what is, and more importantly, isn't, being put out into all forms of media about this subject and all associated areas. So when I first heard of the new documentary movie released by the director James Fox and heard so many good comments about it, I simply had to watch it for myself, to see for myself if it lived up to its hype. Well, I have to say, and it's not often that I do say this about documentaries like this, that this one exceeded my expectations I was so impressed with it, and with the point that James simply presents the facts and lets you, the viewer, make up their own minds, although the evidence is pretty clear to see for those with open eyes and open minds. So, taking a huge leap of faith, I worked very hard to find contact details for James and sent him an email asking if he would be interested in talking with us all about this movie and what brought it about. Also, whatever else that he might want to share. To be honest, I didn't expect a response. After all, who am I in the grand scheme of things? Merely a small podcaster. This episode is the end result of that email. And so, as always, the question is, are you willing to walk with me into this part of the Shadowlands and see what awaits us there? Then let's begin. My guest is fairly well known throughout the world, especially in UFO circles. English-born but raised in the USA, James began his career as a documentary filmmaker in his 20s after travelling the world assisting his father, who was a respected journalist. He has already created a number of UFO-related movies that he is well known for. Starting in 1997 with the documentary UFOs, 50 Years of Denial, followed in 2003 with the documentary movie Out of the Blue, then in 2009 with the TV movie documentary I Know What I Saw, and with a re-released and updated version of it called I Know What I Saw Director's Cut in 2014. Finally, this year, with the release of his tremendously successful and popular The Phenomenon. Since its release in October 2020, it has remained number one in the top rankings for documentary movies, a testament to the fact that people are wanting to know the truth, wanting to know that we are not alone in the universe, and this movie certainly fulfills that need, in my opinion. Before I start this conversation with my wonderful guest James Fox, I'm going to begin with a quote from Christopher Mellon. Christopher Mellon was the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence in the Clinton and George W. Bush administrations, and later for Security and Information Operations. He formerly served as the Staff Director of the United States Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, so this is a man in the know. Listen carefully to his words.
Everything that we know and have learned about mankind and its place in the universe suggests that we are a part of the norm. We are not the exception.
you so very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me on the show.
Perhaps we could start with you telling us about how you got into documentary filmmaking, and specifically how you got into the area of UFO documentaries.
That would take us back to the early 1990s, where I had a father who was paralyzed from the neck down with multiple sclerosis, and he was a writer. And
wow.
So I've been traveling. He was a fantastic, hilarious, driven, ambitious, intelligent, witty, great, fun guy. We traveled the world together. I was his legs, his chauffeur, his secretary, his nurse. We just had a lot of fun. We interviewed Stephen Hawking. We interviewed race car legend Dan Gurney. We traveled to Formula One races down in Mexico City. I mean, we did some really cool stuff. And my father was a brilliant writer. I was always amazed at how he could put words together, and so good at it. God, such a skill. And I had picked up probably in the late 80s, very early 90s, certainly the late 80s, early 90s, a video camera from a friend of mine. And I was so amazed at the technology of just the instant, it was tape back then, but the video, instant playback. It's like, it was amazing. It was a real novelty back then, and what a great tool it was for documenting things. And so I started doing video production, probably in my very early 20s. And probably, I don't know, I'm going to say when I was around 23, 24, a very good high school friend of mine, one of my best friends, one of my best mates, we bought a car in London. We flew to Europe from America, and we bought a car in London, and we drove this old Fiat 131. We painted the doors red. We paid like 200 pounds for it. We drove it all the way to Portugal. Had just had a hell of an adventure together, and the car didn't make it out of Portugal. We had to take a bus back. But he was a good friend of mine, this guy Renee, and he started to tell me back in the U.S. About UFOs, and he was one of my best friends, honestly. And he didn't talk to me about it in high school, but he talked to me about it later in our early 20s, and I thought he'd lost his mind. I really did. And he was talking about Roswell in particular. Oh, you haven't heard about Roswell, And I just thought, well, he's been a good friend, and I'm going to have to write him off, and he's lost his mind. And I was telling the story to a mentor of mine. I was apprenticing at a video production house in San Francisco, Ellison Horn Productions, something like this. And this guy, Richard Van Sickle, was one of the senior people at the production house. He was a brilliant guy. I really looked up to him, and I just one day told him, "Oh, you're not going to believe it. A really good friend of mine was telling me about UFOs, and then about how a UFO crashed and aliens were recovered in Roswell back in the 40s." I was like, God, my poor friend, he's lost his mind. And Richard turns to me and he says, "Oh, no, you haven't heard about that?" I said, "What do you mean I haven't heard about it?" "No, I haven't heard about it." He goes, "Oh, yeah, that fully happened." He said, "They actually admitted that it happened." And I thought, well, hang on a minute. Like, Richard is somebody I look up to and I respect, and he's very intelligent, and he runs this video production company. And I thought, well, if Richard thinks it happened, maybe I should take a closer look. And so I did. And I went to a couple of conferences, and I befriended some military guys, basically offered an exchange of documenting them and making their interviews available to the public and documenting presentations and things of that nature. And in exchange, they kind of brought me into their world a bit. And then I think when I was 24, maybe 25, I said, "Hey, I'm going to do a documentary on UFOs." And I was amazed at how not unsupportive my father was, because my father was incredibly supportive of everything I've done. He was the guy that would say, "Son, if you ever want to do whatever it is in life, as long as you're happy, if you want to be a garbage man or a teacher or, as long as you're happy, that's all that matters in life." And he was that guy, and yet he was so opposed to me doing a documentary on UFOs. I mean, he was begging me not to do it. He used things like, you're going down a one-way street, it's dead end, there's nothing to it, it's a waste of your life. And he even had other members of the family, which actually lived in Australia and England and France and Italy, and even Singapore, writing letters and telling me to reconsider, and your father was very concerned, and this kind of thing. Wow. And of course, being a Taurus, I thought, well, I'll prove these guys wrong. And I think it was actually just what I needed, because I didn't realize how difficult it was to shoot a documentary and edit and write. And that's a lot of work. I mean,
a lot of work.
It took me 4.5 years, but I did it, and I sold it to Discovery Channel. And, it was moderately successful. I mean, for the time, it was beautifully received. I eventually got invited to go to Russia because of it.
Wow.
And I sort of got the last laugh, really, and people sort of stood back and thought, well, hang on a second. I wouldn't say I had the full attention of the family, but they were, okay, wow. And I said, well, that's the last UFO doc I ever do. That was hell, kind of thing. And since then, I've learned never to say never, never to say, that's it, because I just finished my 4.5 film on the topic. So all 27 years later.
Oh, that's funny. Why do you... Yeah, never say never. That's absolutely a true say, because something always comes up, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh, yes. And that's the thing, is like, I got invited to Russia, and it was funny, actually, because it's something I don't really share that often, but I was, and if I'm rambling, just cut me off, but
That's okay.
I was selling copies. It was when Art Bell was in the peak of Art Bell's show, right?
The King.
Yes, and we got featured a little bit on Art Bell, and we were selling, which would have been VHS tapes, I'm assuming. I don't think the DVDs were popular back then. But I'm going to say VHS tapes, and I was selling VHS tapes of the film as well. I maintained home video distribution rights, so I could do that on my own and make extra money from the Discovery Channel sale, which I was doing. And I got a letter back from a gentleman who very kindly said, hey, I bought one of your tapes, and it arrived at my house broken. His name was Joe Bellotti. And he said, would you mind terribly sending me another one? And I said, of course. I wrote him a letter, and I thanked him so much for his support. And I said, here's your money back for the inconvenience. Here's your postage back. Here's 2 tapes, one for you, and please feel free to pass another one on to a friend of yours. Oh, and thank you. And that was it. And about 3 weeks later, I kid you not, I never met this guy. He sent me a check for $20,000. And he said, I like the way you operate. I like what you're doing. I'm a wealthy man, and I don't stop. And then I got invited to Russia, and that was, that paid my way to Russia. And then I started shooting generals, and they thought I was Fox from Fox News. So I had all this, like military escorts. I kid you, I'm not kidding you. If you ever watch Out of the Blue, you'll see some of it in there. And when I got home from Russia, I said, well, I guess I'm doing another film on the topic. I didn't mean to, but how could I not? These opportunities are presenting themselves, and that was the birth of Out of the Blue.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
There's a saying that I really, really like, and that's what comes from the heart touches the heart. And obviously the fact that you went out of your way to send him not one but 2 and refund him his money was, that obviously touched him deeply.
Yeah, well, I treated him just like I would want anyone else. I mean, my girlfriend at the time, it was really funny. I'll never forget it. She was like, you can't afford to be giving stuff away and blah, 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 blah. And I said, just stop, just please, just stop. This is how I operate, and this is, And so when that check arrived, I kind of looked at her, and I think she realized,
Yeah.
But things like that happen, and there are really great people in the world that have made this effort possible. And Jesus, I mean, there were times on many occasions where I was so broke I couldn't barely afford to pay attention, and you just have to keep pushing forward,
Right. I've never heard that saying before. Couldn't afford to pay attention. Oh, that's really funny. Can I go back to your dad for a second, just to follow on? Why do you feel that he was so not keen, not supportive about you doing UFO videos?
There was a campaign that started in the 50s. In fact, it was 1953, the Robertson panel of ridicule, right?
Yeah.
And that was a very effective campaign to discredit and discredit and ridicule the topic. And it was a very effective campaign. And my dad was a mainstream journalist, so he was like, this is nonsense. And he never looked into it. I mean, most people that quickly dismiss UFOs, myself included, I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. It's embedded in our psyche, and it was an intentional thing that was done. Very effective campaign, and it stuck. And so anybody, it's like knee jerk, UFOs, crackpot, UFOs. I remember I dated this girl, Rachel, back in college, and I was 18 and she was 19, and she said to me, "Oh, my previous boyfriend was really into UFOs," and I was like, what? You're like, what? Jeez. I didn't ask another question. I was like, what an idiot! Why would you date that guy? But isn't that funny? I mean, I was totally, that programming or whatever it is affected me too.
Social manipulation at its finest. That's a classic example. Yeah. Did you find that you had, when you started to make the phenomenon, did you find that you had resistance from any area getting it made? Like, what were the major hurdles that you had to overcome to make it?
It was a nearly 8-year push. And I only recently, in the last couple of weeks, have been able to kind of breathe and reflect on the journey and how difficult it was. I've shared this with other, people. I have PTSD from this film. And it was really, really intense. I mean, my God, there were some very dark, trying times. It's the best way I can describe it is that, first of all, anything you do that's worthy of anything is incredibly difficult. And you have to remind yourself, if it were easy, it would have been done.
Right.
If it were easy, it would have been done already. And I'm pretty energetic and enthusiastic and stay positive and nose to the grindstone. I like to enjoy myself and have fun, but I also work very, very hard.
Yes.
And this project, when you say some of the hurdles, I mean, Jesus, where do you begin? I mean, it was a hurdle every single day. Some of them seemed insurmountable. There were times when, people tried to shut me down out of maybe just jealousy. I don't know. I had to go through many different funding, ran out of money a number of times. I became a dad at a time when things weren't going particularly well with the film, and funds had dried up, and I had to switch partners and find new producers and new financial backing, and it's incredibly challenging. And look, these things happen, and especially with an independent production, and you just have to keep pushing, and you just don't take no for an answer, and you've got to, I hate to say it, kind of sell your vision. And you'd think it would be, much easier, considering it was my, fourth and a half attempt or project. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're on easy street at all. I mean, you flavor of the week, and then you're, doesn't matter what you produced in the past.
Yeah, so exactly.
The challenges were every possible challenge. Just even getting interviews at times, even when there were times when we had money, it was hard because trying to secure interviews, people are quirky, you know, some people, the whole thing was hard. And then you get to the end and you're exhausted and you're, you know, you've underestimated the budget, and new things come out and you're trying to keep the project current. And at some point you have to say, look, this thing is done. Like, we're done here, you know?
Yeah.
And usually that happens once you're out of money, you know, but you can also just be out of juice. You just, you know, you just don't have any more to push. You know, you gotta, that last 10% is critical, because we had a version that was about 2 hours and 20 minutes, maybe something like this. And some people were like, oh, it's awesome. And I knew inside, no, it's not awesome. This thing needs to be trimmed right down. And that's a pretty brutal process, but you got to keep pushing. Those end months are critical on a film success, and make sure the audio is done properly, all the color corrections done properly. You know, combing through every bit of narration and weeding out anything that doesn't belong or anything that's redundant. And it's hard because you get connected to stuff. So yeah, but anyway, you just got to keep pushing, and you can't let up. You know, even when you're exhausted and you're on all fours and you're barely walking, that last push is very critical, very, very critical. The film wouldn't have been anywhere near as successful as it is now had we gone out with this even the second or third cut.
Right.
Yeah, so I hope I answered that question.
You did, and that's, I can understand, because I actually, well, I was a nurse for most of my working life, and then I had to leave it because of a work-related injury. So I retrained as a graphic designer and a computer and website designer. And one of the things that they really pushed into us when I was training, and happened so many times when you're creating a project, you really love what you've done, but you look at it and you have to throw the good cuts out, the bits you think are good out, but actually they don't need to be there. So I totally get what you were saying about having to throw cut bits of your documentary out. It's hard.
I remember one time in particular what it took to assemble this whole historical segment, and what it went, not just to obtain the content, you know, but also putting it together and writing the narrative. I mean, it was months and months and months and months and months. We edited for 3.5 years, and it had to go. And my one of my partners, this guy Mark Barish, jokingly would say, James, it's time to kill your darlings, you know, and he had to do it, and I had to do it. But there was one time in particular, I'll never forget it, where I highlighted it in the timeline, and I highlighted the whole section. Now all I had to do was hit the delete button, and it was poof, you know. And I had to close my eyes and almost hold my breath and just quickly hit the delete button, because it was like a gut punch, you know. But it was what was best for the film, and nobody misses it.
Right. It's so hard though, because you put so much of your heart and soul into it. Now
I went to South America 4 times, and not 1 second made it in.
Oh wow! Yeah, that's a lot of time and a lot of effort.
I went to China twice, all across China, and maybe 30 seconds or a minute made it in at the end.
Do you think with those bits that didn't make it, do you think you might stitch those together at some time for maybe a follow-on?
Probably, yeah.
Sorry, because it feels to me like so much love and energy and time went into it that it's such a shame to have it wasted. Well,
I've got a lot of people telling me, you know, giving me advice right now, and I need to sort of step back and think about what's best for the phenomenon.
Great.
And you know, I want to make the right decision, and you know, but I love the idea of having like a YouTube channel, which I used to have actually, and just posting stuff for free on it, you know, the stuff that ended up on the edit room floor. But that takes lots of management, and it could take my focus away from bigger projects of that need to happen right now. So
I totally understand that.
Time will tell, but I am dedicated to the phenomenon, and we're the flavor of the week right now.
Oh yes,
which is great, but you have to capitalize, and I don't mean that financially, but capitalize on the spotlight.
Right.
I feel like almost an obligation to keep the momentum going,
right,
and not letting up now, because look how much progress we've made in the last couple of years, right?
Oh gosh, yes. One more question on the area of making the movie before we move on is, were you ever concerned about your personal safety and the safety of your family during the making of the documentary?
There were times often actually, where I felt that, you just kind of feel like you're being watched.
Mm-hmm.
You just kind of feel it. Mm-hmm. I felt that a lot, but I also felt secure knowing that I was working with people like Senator Harry Reid,
right,
and the New York Times, and other governors and the like. I felt a little more protected in the sense that it was higher profile,
right.
And I also had one of my financial backers had assured me that we were being looked after, put it that way.
That's great.
Yeah. But look, I didn't feel like my life was in danger. I never felt like that. But I just, you feel like you're just, you're poking around in places where,
Yeah, exactly. Where they don't want the sun to shine.
People don't want the sun to shine. You're pulling the curtain back a little bit, you know. Yeah, some people want it, but there are other people that don't want it. And I actually got a call, funny enough, which I'll share with you. I don't think I've told anybody. Maybe I have. We got a call from a former CIA guy, and he said, "Hey, I just want to let you know that your film is making the rounds at the Pentagon." And I said, "Wow." And he said, "Yeah, some are bracing for the impact." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, some people, are happy about it, but some people are not happy about it because it's going to, inform the public, and they're going to be, having to answer some questions." So that's kind of neat to know that, that what we're doing is having an impact. And, it's harder for the government, and I say the government, I don't even know who they are at this point, but to give these ridiculous explanations of swamp gas and weather balloons to an informed public.
Yeah, exactly. Correct. And that's actually part of the reason why I started my podcast, because I have been an experiencer my entire life. So I felt like it was important to let people know that, hey, hang on, we're not the only life form out there. There are others. And, if they're like your government came out just this year and said, well, yes, these flying saucers are real, but we don't know where they're from.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Yeah. They've been drip feeding the public for about 3 years now, steadily. So your documentary, The Phenomenon, is perfect timing.
Finally, right? Finally. It only took me 27 years. Sheesh. Yeah, it's funny. When I finished Out of the Blue, I remember, it was really funny. I remember my partner, writing partner, editing partner, this guy, Boris Zubov, great guy, love him to death. And he was in a fetal position, literally crying because I was pushing him so hard. He was having an emotional breakdown. And it was pretty intense for all of us. But he was in a fetal position, and he was just, and his wife looked at me, and she was livid. She's like, "You're killing my husband. What's wrong with you? Stop it. Stop, stop." And I thought, okay, well, I guess the film's done at this point, But in the back of my mind, I was like, the film's not done. Yeah. Well, we sold the film, and then 3 years later, I owned it again. And we sold it to NBC Universal, broadcast on Sci-Fi Channel. And when I owned it again 3 years later, I went back at it, and I spent another couple of years on the movie tightening it up a bit. You know, made it much better. And it's called the director's cut. And it's much better, but still it wasn't there.
Right.
And then I had another go with I Know What I Saw, and again disappointed. Good little film. I sold it for quite a pretty penny at the time to A&E. It went on History Channel. It's a 2-hour special. And that did moderately well. Yeah, we had some really high-profile public endorsements from like Steven Spielberg, and that was great. But still, I wasn't totally happy. It didn't, when you have a concept in your mind of like what it is that you want to accomplish, you think of it, and then it materializes with all this hard work, the birthing process. And with the phenomenon, I sat back, and I'll never forget it. And I said, okay, I think we did it this time. I'm pretty happy.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
That's lovely when that comes. As an artist myself, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah. Uh-huh. And it's not often that you feel like that you're actually satisfied, because you look at your work and you go, well, I should have done this, or I shouldn't have used that color. Yeah, so I totally understand that. So let's talk about your documentary itself, and particularly Mellor. How did he get the data?
You talk about Christopher Mellon?
Yes, Mellon. Oh, did I say Mellor? Sorry, Mellon, yes.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. He, he didn't reveal exactly how it went about. What he said was, and he has to be careful, obviously, because it's kind of a big deal, is that they found a loophole, okay? Found a loophole and basically walked that evidence right out of the Pentagon, and then ended up on the front page of the New York Times. So that, he said it was like a meeting in the parking lot with a briefcase, and the tapes, something like this. But there was a loophole. They didn't they didn't break the law. They bent the rules. Right.
Oh, very good. So for those listeners who are wondering what we're talking about, this gentleman was the gentleman who released the documentaries, the film footage, like the Tic Tac videos. That's correct, isn't it?
Yep. That was Christopher Mellon. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's how that footage got out into the public, and the other ones as well. All 3 of them, was it from him? The Tic Tac.
Yeah, there were 3 videos. Yeah, there were, but there's a lot more we know about, a ton more that have not been released.
Oh.
There's a huge effort to get that stuff. I mean, look, we're pushing for government transparency, right?
Right.
And, one of the bombshell moments of the film is when Senator Harry Reid, who's a household name in America, he was Senate Majority Leader. Everybody knows Senator Harry Reid, and whether people agree with his politics or not, they're like, that's Senator Harry Reid. He's big time. You know what I mean?
Right.
And Senator Reid got Obama to run for president. I mean, that's like well known.
Oh, wow.
And Senator Reid said that in the movie, I couldn't believe when he said it, that most of the evidence hasn't seen the light of day. And that was a moment.
That's definitely a bombshell. Definitely a bombshell.
Definitely a bombshell, yeah. I know.
So does that go along with the COVID-19 bill with the 180-day countdown for UFO disclosure that's doing the rounds at the moment?
Yeah, that happened today. Or is it?
Yesterday?
Oh, sorry. I got notified this morning about that story coming out. And I'd known about it. I'd heard about it through Christopher Mellon, but I didn't quite totally grasp the concept of it. But evidently it's like signed into law, basically. They have to provide this assessment of these things and make it public. So we'll see.
That's going to be very interesting to keep an eye out on that one.
That is for sure. I think 2021 is going to be a very exciting year in general.
I think it's going to be a very, very interesting year. So, of all the experiences that you covered in your documentary, which of all the experiences that you covered in your documentary do you feel to you were the most impressive?
I would have to say, if I could mention, could I mention 4?
Yes, please. Mention as many as you like.
Yeah, I really like, and funny enough, not that many people mention it. I think by the time they get to the end, they'd forgotten about this. But there was a very dramatic encounter with Air Force Colonel William Coleman. And it took place in 1955
yes, that's right.
in a B-25 bomber over Alabama. And he was with a couple of engineers from Lockheed and Boeing. And the significance of it is this. First of all, it's an incredibly dramatic up-close encounter, duration 9 minutes, that started at elevation 9,000 feet, chasing a flying saucer in broad daylight, and it ends up at treetop level, where they literally thought they were going to collide with this disc in a B-25 bomber at treetop level. And he said he had to take evasive action to avoid hitting it. And he said that if he would have turned the plane to the right, he was so low that the wings would have hit the trees. So he had to lift up first and then turn.
Wow.
Lost sight of it for a second. And then when they found it again, it was drifting across a field, a recently plowed field, and swirls of dirt on either end of the disc were.
Oh, that's right.
Close, I said, it doesn't have a tail, doesn't have any wings. Look at the shadow on the ground. The shadow is perfectly round. That's not an airplane. And I said, I'm overtaking it. So I said, hang on. So I'm gonna make a hard turn. There it was, a disc going across the field with 2 big swirls.
And what makes it significant, it's a really dramatic encounter, qualified observers. Then he was later put in charge of public spokesman for Project Blue Book, which is the Air Force's investigatory arm of UFOs. Well, what's the first thing he did?
Right.
He talks about this, is he went to find his own sighting. And guess what?
It wasn't there.
It wasn't there. You know, the more credible the sighting, the more credible the observer, the witness, the less likely it was to see the light of day.
I was going to bring that up later about the cross memo and Project Stark.
Oh, yes. Isn't that cool?
Yes.
That was all Jacques Vallée, yeah. Anyway, the second one was probably the first extremely well-documented close encounter of the third kind in U.S. history, certainly modern history, and that is Socorro, New Mexico, 1964, with the police officer Lonnie Zamora.
Right.
That case is really compelling.
I saw this big cloud of smoke, so I decided to let go of the car and go up there and investigate. By the time I got there, I could see a big white object sitting in the arroyo. I couldn't tell what it was at first.
You know, I loved hearing from the police officer's wife for the first time, the impact it had on his life.
Yeah.
You know, all the government records, the Air Force records from Project Blue Book, even documented doing diagrams of the landing site and the footprints of the creatures, and just such a compelling case. Then, you know, the hearing from Al Chop, who was in the radar room the night of there were 2 consecutive flyovers of Washington, D.C., the Capitol building, the White House. Right. And hearing from, I'd heard about that case for a long time. In fact, I've covered it in previous films. But hearing someone who was actually in the radar room that night, Al Chop, testimony, that archival footage of that interview was taken by a guy named Tom Tullian of Project Archive, or Project Sign Archive, of Al Chop, is just, you know, listening to him describe the pilot who's flying at 600 miles an hour in the pitch black over the Capitol and suddenly finding himself surrounded by unknowns and getting on his radio and radioing down to the tower and basically saying, and look, the people in the tower were listening to his voice, Al Chop included, and, you know, and seeing on the radar dish that they're all around him and hearing him say, I'm surrounded. What do I do? You know, and they all didn't know what to tell him.
He actually said they're closing in on me. What shall I do? It was frightening.
And hearing that, something about hearing that first-hand testimony of someone who was in the radar room really brought that case to life for me. Fascinating case. And then, of course, Rua, Zimbabwe, 1994. You know, the landing at the school. Hearing from the children. Thanks to Dr. John Mack, the Harvard psychiatrist, who interviewed the children in Africa right after it happened. 66. They think there were only 66 people in the playground, but no, there were 100 people in the playground, 100 children. Wow. 66 of them went on camera. So as I went to Africa, and I went to the school and I talked to the teachers, and there was about 100 kids in the playground, and it was 10:30 in the morning, broad daylight, and just the sheer volume of eyewitness testimony, and then of course tracking the children down 20 years later and bringing them in as young adults and listening to their stories now after they've had time to think about it and articulate. You know, it's a really compelling case.
That flew past really slowly. I saw the bigger one and the spaceship, like 4 or 5 of them. It was red, green, and yellow.
There was this big ship. It had these lights, these patterns, and it flew.
Yeah, that one really, I've always followed that one, and the Westford one in Aussie. And there's been a couple of other school ones.
Did you know about the Westall UFO case? Because I didn't.
It was vertical, horizontal, move away from us, back towards us, appear somewhere else.
No, I didn't. I'm absolutely amazed. Both these cases got very little publicity, very little. In fact, they were so not very well known at all. So the fact that you included them, to me, they're probably some of the most credible cases ever, because they were seen by and certainly with the Zimbabwe one, it actually landed and they were being seen.
Yep, I know, right?
Yeah. He had a big head and big black eyes and was dressed in a black bodysuit.
How far away were you when you saw him?
Not very far. About a meter away.
A meter away, that close?
Yes.
I stand by what I saw. There was no reason for any of us to make that up.
Crazy, I know. It's just amazing. And look, even that one little with Father Gill that took place at Papua New Guinea in 1950, was that 7 or 58? But that's that was really fascinating to hear, Father Gill. I mean, I'd heard about that. It was 1958. I can't even pronounce it correctly. But you're the one that's going to pronounce it properly. Papua New Guinea. How do you say that?
Papua.
Thank you.
Papua New Guinea. I probably mispronounced it as well.
But here, that was what it took to track down that interview with Father Gill.
This solid-looking object, and can you imagine what it's like to look up in the sky and see some figures up there?
Oh my gosh, I could write you could do a documentary on every single archival bit of footage that we found.
Yeah, really.
To uncover.
As I was watching your documentary, I was thinking, oh my God, he's gone to such effort to track these people down, to find them, to connect them, to get them to actually talk. That really impressed me greatly, because I recognized how much actual work was involved for you.
Insane. It absolutely insane. And I try not to read the reviews of, because they say don't do it, because people are just so, yeah. And I'd see some, probably some quasi-seasoned, UFO enthusiasts, oh, there's nothing new in this documentary, same old rehashed, just whatever. And I think to myself, what are you talking about? Like, I can tell you that some of the most seasoned historians have gone, where did you find that interview? Where did you find those headlines? Where did you find those audio bits? I was like, thank you for recognizing that. That was a monumental effort that took years.
Yeah.
The 1978 footage at the United Nations, the very man, Lee Spiegel, who put that event on with Jacques Vallée and Dr. Jalen Hynek, he didn't even have that footage and didn't even think it existed. And we found it.
Wow.
And then all these other archive interviews. So, and I can't change history. If we're going to cover some of the history, some of the more salient aspects of UFO history, it is what it is. But, having new testimony and new archival, never before seen footage really brings it to life in a way that I haven't seen it done before.
It really does. And I was actually reading when I was researching this, I was actually reading some of the bits that people had written, and I saw that someone said, oh, it's nothing new, and I'm going, what? Did these people watch this with their eyes closed? And I watch these documentaries with a knowing eye, because I know what I know,
right,
from personal experience. So I look at these documentaries and I look at what they produce, and I'm going, but with yours, it was stuff that hadn't been out in the public. I think these people, some of them, they just look for things to
criticize,
because that's what they feel their job is.
But I do think, like, if you knew the lengths that I went to uncover never before seen archival footage, or extremely rare archival footage, and what we did, it was a Herculean effort. I cannot emphasize that enough, what it took. Years.
Oh, I absolutely recognize that. And as soon as I was watching your documentary, that was what really hit me, was the fact that the efforts you had gone to, because I knew what a task it was to track these people down and to get people to talk. That really impressed me as much as anything. So overall, James, how well do you think that the public's received your documentary? Obviously really well, because it's doing good.
It's been number one on iTunes worldwide for documentaries, and just stuck at number one. It just doesn't move. In fact,
it's great.
I can look right now and see if it's still there. It kind of blows my mind, quite honestly.
Wow.
My partner, Rebecca, she's like, honey, your phone is broken. You need to try it on my phone. That's not right. And then I said, yeah, there it is, stuck right there. Number one.
Wow.
Stuck there.
That's awesome, James. Yeah. And that's so well
It's just unbelievable. It's just day after day, week after week, it doesn't budge. It has not moved from number one.
That's because, what comes from the heart touches the heart. And when you speak a truth, when you tell a truth, people resonate with it on their soul level. And people now, more people than ever, are waking up to the fact that there are many more realities than the one we're currently knowing of. But I would like to talk about Jacques Vallée and the Ford Meadow.
Yes.
And when you brought up Project Bluebeam, which was really just a cover project to placate the masses, which really was nothing, but Project Stark was a well-thought-out, well-funded, highly technical underground project. So can you tell us, my listeners, about that, please?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's proof positive that paralleling this dog and pony show of Project Blue Book, which was, poorly funded, and I think it only had a staff of maybe 3 or 4 at the most, and was a incredibly well-funded underground, super secret, off the radar UFO project, where they were utilizing sensors and had budgets and scientists and all that. And Dr. Vallée came across this memo, which was actually classified or secret, in Hynek's own files, and eventually, through quite a tedious process, had it declassified and made it available to us. And he's like, look, there's a lot of documents out there, but this is bona fide. Like, I myself found it. I myself got it declassified and wasn't redacted. And Valet puts a lot of weight on that. He found it. I mean, it's a legitimate government document. It's not.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it exciting. I mean, does it really surprise me? It doesn't really surprise me. Does it surprise you? Of course.
No.
You've got unknowns penetrating sensitive airspace, whizzing around with impunity. Of course, they're going to put all hands on deck and try to get to the bottom of it and allocate serious, significant resources to figure out what's going on.
Right.
I mean,
absolutely.
It's their job. Of course, they have to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that really interesting, and that's new. That's never been in the public before.
No. I mean, that was the first time that I'm aware of that he ever went, gave an interview about it and shared it and all the details. And Jacques had a couple of little tricks that he pulled out of his sleeve during production. And I actually consider Jacques a dear friend now. I have so much respect for him. So much respect for him. I mean, I just, so much respect for that man. I mean, all I can do is just listen and learn, really.
Yeah. He's a very interesting chap. And of course, they used him in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Spielberg used him.
I know, it's crazy. Yeah. I wonder if Steven Spielberg has seen this movie. He saw my last UFO film. I don't know if he's seen this one or not. I would imagine. I mean, how could he not have? I don't know.
Well, I would imagine that he probably has. I'm surprised you haven't heard from him.
No, I know. I'm surprised too. I need to follow up on that one.
Yes. So, what are your thoughts about the government response today compared to 1953 when they, ridiculed and how do you feel about the government handling, well, not only the government, but the press no longer ridicules these subjects when they come up on the television?
I think the climate has changed significantly, particularly since the front page of the New York Times featured that previously secret UFO Pentagon program, ATIP.
Right. Oh, yes. Yes, that's right.
Aerospace Threat Identification Program. I think that everything changed on that day. And I knew it at the time because I've had skeptical family members and, friends over the decades. And when that hit, even my neighbor was a famous editor. He edited Apocalypse Now. His name was Walter.
Oh, wow.
And Walter even said, my God, James, like, you looks like you were right all these years, and that's been it's nice to see. And like I said, the climate has changed. It's being taken seriously. It's being acknowledged as something. And I think that 2021 is going to be an exciting year for all of us.
It's going to be a very exciting year. And of course, with the COVID situation, people have had time to sit and think about things. They've had time to look at the sky and see what's out there, whereas before they wouldn't have had that space to do that because they're just so busy living their lives. People are busy.
It might be actually the perfect time. I mean, people are stuck in their homes. Everything's kind of changed, yeah. I mean, I think you remember, I think it was in April or May, I can't remember, but basically the government said, Department of Defense, yes, those videos are legitimate and they're true unknowns. Basically admitting, for the first time that, these things are real and they're probably otherworldly. And I remember some comments online on social media, people were going, this happened, and the government just said aliens exist. So there we go.
Exactly. And what amazes me is that it didn't make worldwide news. There wasn't a big.
The best way I can describe that. I was interviewing probably a group of about 5 or 6 women that were hospice workers. They described the massive UFO flyover of Phoenix, Arizona in 1997, March 13th. I don't like to call it the Phoenix Lights. It's commonly referred to as the Phoenix Lights because it was more than lights. It was a massive craft, multiple craft.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm interviewing these women, and they were describing how they're having tea. It was a late afternoon, early evening, summer. And all of a sudden, this object that looked like a floating city, according to their description, floated right over the top of them. And it took a couple of minutes, but they could see the craft. And they said, look, if we hadn't looked up, we wouldn't have even known it was there. That's how quiet it was. But it floated over the top of us, and they could see compartments in the metal, looked like they described it looking like a city. And it just floated very slowly right over the top of them, very low. And like I said, it took a couple of minutes, and they all just sat there with their mouths open, looking up at this thing. And then they went, and then it passed over, and then they went right back to chatting about what they were chatting about. And I said, well, hold on a second. Well, didn't somebody get up and run to grab a camera or get in your car, chase it, like something? They said, no, we didn't. I said, well, how could you not? They said, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that it's so massive a concept. It's such a people don't know how to process it. It's beyond something to wrap your mind around, and so it's almost like it just didn't happen. It's like you can't process what just happened. So it's all treat it like a non-event. It's weird. It's really strange. It's really strange. And I've talked to a number of witnesses that have had things, not all of them, but a lot of them that just they can't even process it.
Yeah. Of course, because it's so far out of their normal paradigm. Totally. And I forget what it's like for people, because for me, UFOs and star people are just my day-to-day reality, So I forget what it's like for the person who doesn't have those experiences. It's very overwhelming. And people have to really change their paradigms and change the way they think about things. And for some people, it's just too hard. It's just
that's a good case. And I remember talking to a number of witnesses on the Phoenix Lights case. And there was one car that I spoke to the drivers that pulled over on Interstate 10 between Tucson and Phoenix. And they said that, in fact, most of the cars on the freeway had pulled over and people gotten out and were looking at this massive boomerang-shaped craft floating very slowly, just down the freeway, right over the top of the freeway on its way. I think it was from Phoenix to Tucson or Tucson to Phoenix. I'm pretty sure it was Phoenix to Tucson. And then they got back in their cars and off they went.
Yeah, I know, crazy, eh? Crazy. They don't question it.
Well, what do you do? I mean,
yeah. And of course, people are, because of how it has been treated, people were more shy back then about speaking out than they are now because of the ridicule.
I would love to see a mass sighting like the one of 1997 over Arizona. Sorry, started in the tip of the southern tip of Nevada, and then worked its way across the state of Arizona from north to south over several hours. And if something like that happened today, and it was witnessed by a lot of people at the time because the Hale-Bopp comet was going on back then. People were out under the night sky to get a glimpse of the Hale-Bopp comet. But if it happened today, which inevitably it will, there'd be a lot of cell phone footage of it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think that's going to be, and one thing I'll point out that's interesting, people say, well, if UFOs are real, wouldn't they just land on the White House lawn? Well, we don't know. You look at what they do, but you look at what they don't do. They don't make themselves overtly known. They're doing pretty outrageous stuff for sure. But in terms of all they'd have to do is hover over the Macy's Day Parade or New York City on New Year's Eve, and it's a done deal, right? I mean,
yeah.
But they don't do that. And you have to ask yourself why. Why is it that they reveal themselves just enough, but not too much? And one can only speculate. But you look at what they do, but you also look at what they don't do. That answers question.
Yeah, it does exactly. So, where do you think you're going to go from here, James? You're going to have a break, a well-earned rest?
No. In a word? No.
I knew you were going to say that.
No. I thought I was going to, but I feel a sense of obligation to take advantage of the momentum that's occurring right now, and not let up. As much as I'd like to, I think it would be a mistake. So I'm going to keep the hammer down right now.
Yeah, I totally get that, and you're right. You really need to take advantage of the momentum.
You have to, right? We're the flavor of the week, and next week it'll be somebody else, and that's great. I'm really happy that we set the bar for how this topic really needs to be treated and reported.
Oh my gosh, you certainly have,
right? And I'm really proud of that. I really am, and it took a village. I mean, look, I was just one of many people, and I say this sincerely, is that this film's success is all of our success. This is not about me and any one person. This story is about all of us. And we all are entitled to know what's going on, whether it's a little frightening or not. And it's part of our place in the universe, and it's part of a much bigger story. And I think we're all entitled to the information. I really do. I look at my son, and I think I'd like for him to grow up in a world where this is not being kept secret.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And that's very well said, James. Very well said. And I absolutely agree with that. People have a right to know. Do. It's our right. And a lot of the information has been held back because they use it just that people panic, that religions will go under, that they won't have the control that they have currently over the humanity as we stand.
Don't you think it would have a unifying effect on humanity?
I would think so.
I do, because I think it forces us to see ourselves for who we really are. I mean, look, exactly. I had the distinct privilege of getting a sit-down interview with a 6th man who walked on the moon. Yeah. And I will never forget what he told me. When I want to really absorb a particular story, I always close my eyes, because I allow the words of the witness to recreate the story, the imagery in my mind, right? It's almost like I'm experiencing it through them, like through their eyes, right? And I get them to give me vivid detail. And I close my eyes, and then it recreates these visuals, and it's amazing. And I listened to Dr. Edgar Mitchell, 6th man, Apollo 14, because I asked him, and I said, I know that you get this all the time, and I'm super duper sorry to ask this of you, but my God, what was it like to land on the moon? So he told me in vivid detail, and he said, I'll never forget this. He said, I stood on the surface of the moon, and I watched an Earth rise. And he said there was this blue marble, this beautiful blue marble suspended in the vacuum of darkness. And he said there were no borders, no country lines, and he said I picked up one hand, and I blocked out the entire earth with one hand, and the palm of my hand, and everything we knew. And he realized, you see it, we're one race, one people, one planet. And I think that this story coming out would have that unifying effect on all of us. I really believe that.
What a beautiful description he gave. I could just, like you, I could just see that in my mind's eyes, I guess that's the thing when you're a creative, artistic type person, it's easier to visualize stuff like that. And that's really, really touching. And that's a really nice way to actually, I think, end our conversation. James, I'm so grateful for your time today. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. Your video website is the phenomenonthemovie.com.
Yeah, so
correct?
Here's the thing. If your audience, your listeners want to help out, they can rate the film. It's super duper helpful. It really is incredibly helpful, believe it or not, because it goes on algorithms and the ratings, and then other platforms look at it. Oh, this is rating well. So to take the time if you like it, and hey, take the time even if you don't like it, and you can rate it. But rating the film is incredibly helpful. It only takes a minute. You can just give it a star rating. You can say something, or you could just give it a star rating. That's very helpful. Rotten Tomatoes, iTunes, Amazon. The other thing is, if you want to rent it, then just Google and find the least expensive. I think it's a couple dollars. But if you want to buy it, there are only 2 platforms that offer 3 hours of bonus material for free. No extra cost. Yeah, I put 3 hours of bonus material in, and then I found out that only iTunes and Vimeo offered the 3 hours of bonus material. So those are the only 2 platforms, if you buy it, that you should buy it from, is iTunes or Vimeo, and you get 3 hours for the same price of bonus material.
Dang, I missed that.
Yeah,
I'll have to go and get it.
Tell people that, because people should know if they're going to spend the money and buy it, that they should get the 3 hours of great hours too. Like, really, I put some good stuff in there.
Oh, I'm going to have to go back and buy that, James, so I can see the extra bits, because the movie itself is amazing. And I cannot stress enough to my listeners, look, go out and watch it for yourself. James has put his heart and soul into this, and it shows. It's really an amazing, amazing movie. James, thank you for your time. I've truly appreciated this. It's been really interesting.
Well, thank you for having me on. I've had a wonderful time myself. Thank you for your support and all your enthusiasm. Thank you. Seriously.
I'd like to thank James for his time today and for the permission to use the sound clips from his documentary, The Phenomenon. I'm very grateful for both. I've thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with James, and I hope you all have as well. Please share this episode with anyone you feel would listen to it. I'm going to close this conversation as I started it with another quote from Christopher Mellon.
We need to begin to prepare to accept and understand that we are not alone in the universe, have not been at all throughout this time.
If you enjoyed this podcast, as James said earlier in the episode about rating his movie, please do the same for our podcast. The ratings of this podcast are looked at by people, and if it's rating well, then they are more likely to want to listen to it. It really does help immensely. So give it a positive rating and a review. Thank you so much. Today's bumper music is called Galactic Battles by Bonnie Grace. Sort of appropriate, don't you think? I'm so very grateful to my patrons for their ongoing support. If you want to become a patron of the show, then head over to patreon.com/MCC15 and sign up now. As a patron, you get access to a special members-only page on the podcast website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. from which you can download full transcripts of each episode. You also have access to some interview bits that may not make the episodes and little extras, as I have time to create and add them for you. You also get early access to the shows before everyone else gets to hear them. Also, you have my absolute gratitude and appreciation. So, what are you waiting for? Go to patreon.com/MCC15 and sign up now. The continued support of my patrons makes it possible for me to financially cover part of the costs of producing this show for you all, so thank you all so much. If you have any suggestions for topics you might like me to cover in upcoming episodes, then please don't hesitate to contact me. Or if any of you have any questions, suggestions, or any comments that you would like to make, or experiences that you might like to share with myself or my audience, or if you feel you might be a good fit as a guest on my podcast, then just email me at shadowlands@yahoo.com or check out the Be a Guest page on the podcast website. Check out our Facebook page, Walking the Shadowlands, our Instagram feed of the same name, and our Twitter feed at Shadowlands10. Like and follow for hints on our upcoming episodes. And of course, so you don't miss out on any episode, make sure you subscribe on your favourite podcasting platform. This podcast is available on all free podcasting platforms and iHeartRadio as well. Also, if you have Alexa, simply say these 4 words, Open Walking the Shadowlands, and Alexa will play our latest episode for you. If you don't have a smartphone, then you can listen to the episodes from the podcast website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. For those hearing impaired, there's a full written transcript of each episode on the website, so you don't miss out at all. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your workmates about our show. Encourage them to listen and to subscribe also. The more, the merrier. Thanks for listening to this episode. Ka kite ano, oia koi. I'll see you again.
Thanks for listening